Okay, Ruben, I want to sincerely thank you for making the time for us. This has been a long process. A couple of years ago, I reached out to you, you were in the thick of it. And I think what I need to do is just to kind of give you a little background so you could answer questions. And I want to ask you first if I have your permission today to interview you. You're not doing this under duress, and give us an assent if this is okay for us to interview you.
Yes, I'm giving you the permission. Yes.
Okay, well, we have to cover ourselves these days. So I want to just give you a little background where this comes from, and you may not know where all the connections are, but I was listening to a story on PBS, and I was hearing about Dr. Carlos Gutierrez and the fact that he was giving up his Fridays, half a days to go out to these places to tend to individuals that were ill and had come largely from Central America. And he was very, very conciliatory, very kind, and he said, please come on down. So we really got a kick out of Dr. Charlie, and he posts a lot of stuff on Facebook. We're friends, a lot of comedy and things like that. So we really got an understanding of going to certain shelters, and he kind of talked a great deal about you. One of the days we were just going to one shelter to another, they got a message from you that said there was roughly 1,000 people that had just been let loose by ICE, and they were on the streets, and we went to a hotel where it was full of people from Central America. It was very vivid, kind of visceral. We saw the kids coming in from Central America, and they were eating pizza, and they traveled great distances, but they seemed happy, big smiles everywhere. And then I saw, Carlos go into the bathroom and had basically nothing in there to attend to anybody. And I think we were really, really taken by that. And I interviewed him for probably a 9-minute, what the bottom line was about a 9-minute, video. And he often talked about you and the word refugee. He said, Ruben wants us to use the word refugee, so I remembered that. And I think that the kind of background that I had and what I'm doing right now, for my work and what we're pitching to a PBS, is that the El Paso massacre was not an aberration. The people that I've interviewed, I see this as more than 200 years of Anglo-racism against Hispanics. And so in my own research, I try to chronicle that all the way back to the 1820s and I really wanted to find that kind of hard evidence, not just say, hey, this is an aberration. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is challenge people's ideas about refugees and immigrants and other people when they have very little knowledge about what's going on. For example, I'm a history professor. Very few times have I ever heard anybody talk about Reagan policy in Central America and how we create these disasters and set up dictators and military juntas, and you just hear the rage against these immigrants. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I just wanted to set the stage, but I was wondering if you can give us just a brief bio of your life, not just one aspect, but just so we can get a human feel for who you are.
Well, I'm born and raised here on the border in El Paso, Texas. I was born here in El Paso and raised by a Mexican family, my parents, my siblings. I went away to school. I was fortunate in that I was able to go to a Jesuit university and then do some graduate studies at another Jesuit university. But I returned and have really lived what is the majority of my life here in El Paso. Annunciation House, which has come to define the majority of my working years, it's now going on 43, soon to be 44 years, is a work of hospitality, of receiving the refugee. We're right on the border. The houses of Annunciation House are 10 blocks from the actual boundary line. So we've been receiving refugees throughout the entire 43, 44-year history of Annunciation House. El Paso is somewhere in the neighborhood of 80+% Hispanic. So it's a community, it's a fairly large city, 800,000 inhabitants. We're right next to our sister city, Ciudad Juarez, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.25 to 1.5 million inhabitants. So it's a fairly large metropolitan area. And I grew up in this environment. I grew up in this reality, for which I'm very grateful, because it allowed me to be witness to the phenomena of migration. And El Paso, as the name implies, El Paso, the pass to the north, has been a place where refugees have been arriving and crossing literally through centuries. Many people are surprised to learn that the first Thanksgiving took place here in El Paso, even before
The Puritans.
The Puritans arrived. And so it's a really significant border community, you know.
So just while you're on that segue, and I'll get back to it, I just went to the Cielo Vista Mall, and I'd written an article about this, and it's one thing to write an article about it and actually to show up and be there. And when I was within a couple of miles of the place, I just got this very uneasy feeling. We wanted to go inside, almost pay respect for what happens. And I wrote about the manifesto. I looked at the manifesto numerous times. It's only 4 pages. I must have read it 20 times, and I pick up something different every time I look at it. But there's a couple of points that I want to address to you. I kind of lay it out here. Is in the very beginning of the manifesto, it's that this reaction of Patrick Cruce's, it's against the invasion of his country, his Texas, his people, his culture, his identity. I mean, the irony is palpable when you talk about it is the Mexican invasion. And then the other thing that he does, he depicts himself as a defender. I am not the instigator. I am not the aggressor here. I am merely the defender of my way of life, and it's the Mexicans coming in. And I kind of argued, and some people disagree with that, but I say that the choice of El Paso was as premeditated as were the killings. That you just said it, I believe it's 83% Hispanic population. To me, there is no doubt that a border community was a very good reason for white supremacists to come here. He railed against the Mexicans, he railed against Mexican Americans. Whether you were legal or not, it didn't matter to him. So does that sound reasonable conclusion that someone would come here for this particular kind of diversity, this kind of community, this cohesiveness that you have in El Paso?
It does, but I say that with certain caution. You have to remember that El Paso is not the only border cities. There are border cities along the U.S.-Mexico border, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to Tijuana, San Isidro, California. So there are many border communities, and I can't pretend to understand the mind of Cruces and his decision. Obviously, to come all the way from Dallas to El Paso, there was some intentionality there. From what I've read, his stopping in at that Walmart next to Cielo Vista was more haphazard, that he was hungry and he pulled off the freeway and he wanted to get something to eat, and he saw the Walmart, he saw people coming in and out, he realized a lot of them are Hispanics, and that's what led him to make the decision to say this is probably as good a place as any. So there's a certain element of chance that's involved in that. I want to be careful to not to spend too much time on the actions of a single individual. I think it's really important for us to understand that racism is something that pervades so much of our national community, and we see it in different forms. Obviously, in the example of Patrick Cusin's, for him it was the Mexican and the Hispanic. But if you look throughout the country, especially in the advent of George Floyd's murder, we see that racism that is so visible with people of black skin. We've seen, as a result of the coronavirus, the antagonism that has grown, people from Asia Pacific descendants, that there's something wrong with them, that they don't belong. And so I want to be careful to not zero in on the actions, as atrocious as they were, of one single individual, and instead call to mind that we do have a real problem of racism in the United States. And we have a long way to go. I think that, I've been doing this work for so many years. Overwhelmingly, there are people from Mexico and Central America who have stayed in our houses. There's a good percentage of people that come from South America and a few that come from nations beyond the Western Hemisphere, but primarily they're Hispanics that have passed through here. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm not indigenous to the United States. I'm not a member of one of the tribes, the indigenous tribes of the United States. So I too am a migrant. My parents would be migrants. My grandparents would be migrants. So I have no more or no less of a claim, even though I was born in the United States, I have no more or no less of a claim to say that this is my country than the person who comes after me. I'm deeply concerned about the truth that my history is also from another land, but because I happen to be born here, that I somehow then own the land. And I'm very grateful that I live in the United States. I'd like to share that gratitude. I'd like to share that gratefulness with all those that are wanting to arrive, that are wanting to be part of our country, that are wanting to help build our country, help define our country. When we speak about our history as a nation, as a people, and we look at some of the things that we would consider the positive contributions that the people of the United States have made to the world community, I think that's a collective gift of migrants. That's a collective gift of people who were able to come and to realize the strength that comes from making a community, one community that is formed of many parts, many nationalities. So I think it's really important for us to say, yes, what happened in August of 2019 was horrendous. Here at that Walmart, that's horrendous. That's going to be engraved in the history of El Paso and in the community of El Paso and the citizens of El Paso. It's going to be engraved forever. That will be a pivotal point insofar as El Paso is concerned, its past and its future. But it's not the totality. And I think it's just very important for us to always strive to acknowledge what we still have to do, what the work ahead of us is, and not only in El Paso but across the country, and not only for Hispanics, for blacks, for the indigenous people, for Asian Pacific people of all the different races.
Right. A couple of days ago, I met with the Tapilam Nation, Ramon Vasquez, and they were talking about all of the dead indigenous population in the Alamo. We had the good fortune to interview some people inside the Alamo. We had a permit to do that. And one of the things that the Tapilam Nation had really kind of argued for is inclusion. They want to be part of the story. So if it's the Texas story, if it's the Alamo story, if it's the first Texans, you're dealing with the indigenous population. And they make the argument that they were the first Catholics as the Spanish colonized, and they were buried there, but they want that particular respect. They want the respect of the indigenous population, and the Tejanos do, and it's like a full, all the achievements that people made. You're talking about the richness of diversity, the immigrants that are coming, or the refugees that are coming in, that contribute to the great story. I wanted to ask you if you could kind of take us through. I know you do so much. I said this is the third time I try to get a hold of you, and maybe the third time is the charm. And all your friends speak so highly and said, you got to talk to him. Have you talked to Ruben? I said, well, I'm trying, to get this idea. But everybody speaks very highly of it. Can you just kind of maybe take us through a variety of the work you do? I've met two sisters today from Ireland. I've met assorted people that are helping. What's kind of the gamut, all the things that you do at Annunciation House?
The work of Annunciation House is primarily focused on providing hospitality, and to that end, we operate several houses of hospitality. We call them houses; they're buildings, and some of them, like right now, we are in Casa Vides, one of our buildings, where we receive people. Right now, the sounds, the voices that you are hearing in the background, we just finished receiving an 18-year-old. This is an unaccompanied minor that arrived, that was taken into custody by Border Patrol and then turned over to the Office of Refugee Resettlement because he turned 18 years of age. He then becomes an adult, and so he's released, and so they ask us if we will take them in once they get released, and we do. And so he just finished arriving, an 18-year-old from Guatemala.
Yes.
That's a constant for us in our different houses of hospitality. Today, for example, immigration is releasing 90 plus refugees, and so they're going to different ones of our hospitality houses. So the primary work, what consumes all of us, is the work of hospitality, of welcoming people, giving them a place to sleep at night, making sure that they're fed and have a place to shower, change of clothing, etc. So it's very, very much down-to-earth hospitality, all of it being done by volunteers that come from, you mentioned the two sisters from Ireland, but they come from all across the country, individuals who are willing to come and offer themselves for X number of months. Some of them make longer term commitments of a year or more. And with hospitality comes the full gamut of hospitality. We received yesterday a woman. Today we're going to receive a man who fell off the border wall. It's a 30-foot wall, and it's a woman who fell off the wall and broke her ankle, and she's being released, discharged by one of the hospitals, and she'll be coming to us, and she'll be arriving at one of our houses very soon. So it's the entire gamut of individuals that come. They come from many different nationalities. They stay with us for various lengths of times. Some of them leave very quickly because they have sponsors in the United States, family members or friends that are able to receive them, and they buy them plane tickets or bus tickets, and they move on fairly quickly. So it's hospitality in its totality. They're single individuals, they're families. We're expecting right now a mom with 4 kids that is due to arrive here at this house momentarily. We've seen, tens of thousands of families, So,
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, I've been only teaching 27 years, but not 43 years. But I often look back and think of former students and the way my teaching is evolved, or when I say the teaching conditions come up, like a COVID crisis, or it could be Trump's zero tolerance kind of policy. One of the things I believe I'd like to kind of think of myself as a bit of a muckraker, in the sense that if you think about the original muckrakers with the literature, it was almost like shocking people. What I like to say is that people that have hard hearts to soften them, to see that connection of humanity. I give this example, but one of the things that I heard from the Tapilam Nation was that if there was one white person that was buried in the Alamo, their ancestors would have the right to stop anything because the person was white, and said, hey, listen, that's my grandson or that's my grandfather, whatever it is, before you go on, by state law. This is the law of the state. And what Ramon Vasquez is focusing on, the fact that they're indigenous people. They know they're indigenous people. They've been mapped out where they are in the Alamo. But it seems to me it's almost like a dehumanization, that the indigenous population can't get under state law now of the state of Texas. They should be able to stop it. And what Tapilam is saying is they're going to make a Disneyland at the Alamo. It's coming. There'll be amusement parks, there'll be an extension, there'll be all this. Tapilam Nation, just as an example, they don't want to stop that. They said, we would like to give these people, which they like to say our first Catholics here, to give them a proper burial. And one of the things that I find hard, and I know my views of the world have changed drastically since I was a kid. I wasn't a history teacher when I was a kid. But what kind of human stories, in 43 years, the stories that you must have. I know that Dr. Charlie, he told me this story and he's on the video that I did with him, of this woman from Central America, and he said she was a pretty woman, by all accounts. She had a child. The cartel went and somebody raped her, and she was put into the sex trade. Her child was with her during the sex trade. And they said, if you ever think about, leaving, you will be hanged, from the rafters. I find it hard, if you could give somebody that story, that anybody's heart about immigration or refugees or any of these things, that you couldn't be moved by that. And you've been doing this for 43 years. So I do believe this is a faith-based organization.
It is.
Okay, so I can identify with that. So I'm just kind of wondering, in your 43 years, if you have any spectacular stories to share with us that really let people know the humanity of who you're dealing with, because obviously your approach is hospitality. I guess you would say with hospitality comes dignity. Welcome here. You have a place. We're going to feed you. We're going to let you sleep here. You're going to have some support system here. So what kind of stories would you be able to share with us to let other people know the kind of individuals that you've encountered from Mexico and from Central America?
Well, there's so many things that come to my mind, in response to your question. I'm going to put out a couple of things. First, I'm not sure that everybody's heart would be softened by hearing the story of this woman who was raped and put into the sex trade. It's a reminder to me that the racism has two parents. One of them is fear, that we're afraid of what is different from us. So I'm white. I am afraid of someone who is not white. I am Irish. I am afraid of someone who is not Irish, and I trace my roots. So fear is so much a part of what makes us anti-other people. And the other parent is a real sense of inferiority, where I have a desperate need to define myself by believing that I am better than someone else, because I've not been able to discover enough within myself to say I am valuable, I am worthy of myself. I still need to bounce off someone else. I need to make someone else less than. And I say this because I've encountered over the years, I've encountered people whose hearts are not moved. They're not. There would be people that would say, after hearing what happened to that woman, just automatically say, well, she shouldn't have come. She shouldn't have come. Kind of, it's her fault. She shouldn't have come. So for all of you out there that are thinking of coming, this is what awaits you. Don't come, So that's I've encountered that. I've met this. I've confronted this, and it's part of the reality. The second thing that comes to mind as I hear your question is all the different stories. There are many, many stories, many. I mean, we've had hundreds of thousands of people pass through our houses, so you can imagine the stories. I would like for us to, in the midst of that, because we are drawn to the stories that are just very dramatic, very compelling, but sometimes that can be at the expense of the overwhelming ordinariness of human beings that are trying to survive. So many, like this young man that just arrived, yesterday, he was 17 years old. Today he turns 18. He gets released because he's now technically an adult, but he's 17 years old. He's from Guatemala, and he came up by himself because the reality in Guatemala gave him and his family no choice but to risk making that journey, because they don't see any other way to be able to live their lives in what we would consider just the most fundamental of human levels. Just to be able to make sure that I have enough to eat. I've been to Guatemala, I've been to El Salvador, I've been to Honduras, I've been to all the countries of Central America, I've been to Ecuador, to Colombia, and in all of these places, I have walked the neighborhoods of the very, very poor. In Ecuador, the families that are living on the skirts of the volcanoes, of the mountains, where they literally carve on the side of the mountain, they carve and they build cardboard houses at tremendous risk, because a strong rainstorm, a landslide from the mountain is going to wash away hundreds, if not thousands, of homes and people. That's daily life. I'm going to share one story that I've shared on other occasions, but I think is particularly apropos for this very moment. Many years ago, we received a woman that arrived with a baby, about 12, 14 months old, and her daughter, who was like maybe 6 years of age, and the famous couple of grocery bags, all of her possessions. And she arrived at Annunciation House, and she asked, where can I find Ruben? And she told them, I don't have any place to stay, and I was upstairs at that moment, and they told her, go on upstairs and you'll find him upstairs. It just so happened that as she started to climb the stairs, I started coming down, and there's a landing there, and that's where I encountered her, and she saw me, and she said, are you Ruben Garcia? And I said, yeah, I'm Ruben Garcia. And she introduced herself, and she said, I don't have any place to stay. I I think I've got the flu. I've got my 2 daughters. We don't have any place to stay. And then she just sat down and just started crying. Just, can you help me? Can you help me? And I told her, yeah, we can give you a place to stay. And so I asked one of the volunteers to take her to a room and give her a bed for her and her kids. And she did. She had the flu. She was feeling miserable. In addition to it was cold, in addition to not having a place to stay, what have you. She started recovering, and 2 or 3 days later, we get a phone call from a woman who said, "Do you have anybody there who would be willing to work for the day? I need someone to clean my house." And I called her and I asked her if she wanted to go work for X number of hours cleaning somebody's house, and she said, "Yeah." So they picked her up the next day. She went, she cleaned their home, and that evening when I bumped into her, I asked her, "How did it go?" She said, "Fine, just cleaning." I cleaned it out, cleaned the house, etc. And one of the things I always ask them is, did they pay you? Because if you're undocumented, it sometimes happens that people use you and that they don't pay you, and they say, "What are you going to do? Go report me and run the risk of getting deported?" So she said, yes, she paid me. She paid me $15. So $15 for a day's work of cleaning a house. So I said, well, they paid you. And she then said, I need to start saving. I've got to see what my next step's going to be. Can you save these $10 for me? And I said, yeah, we'll save those. We'll start saving whatever you give us to save. And then she took the other $5. And she looked at me and says, and I want to give you these $5, and I want you to take these $5 and help someone else who is in even greater need than me. And that has been one of those moments that has stayed with me all of my life, because here's someone that is absolutely destitute. She has no place to live. She's in a shelter. She's undocumented. She's hiding from Border Patrol. She's got 2 daughters. And she finally gets a day of work. And she takes a third of what she earned. And she says, I want you to use it to help someone that is in even greater need. I go back to what I said initially about racism having 2 parents. There's the fear, and here is this person who is putting no conditions to her gift. She's not saying, I want you to use this to help someone who is Hispanic, someone who is of this skin color, someone, no conditions, just someone who has a greater need than I do, who is even more in need than I am. The other thing that I mentioned was that sense of inferiority, that I need to find my identity by pushing somebody else down. What kind of self-value and worth she had been able to arrive at in her own life, that she was willing to share whoever needed it, you know. There have been times when people have asked me about how does Annunciation House stay open. I say it stays open by the generosity of people who donate, and then the volunteers that come and offer themselves. And people have made the comment, it really must be something for those people that have been able to give you what it takes to keep the entire operation go. And I said, it is, and we're profoundly grateful. But if you want me to tell you who really has taught me about generosity, it's this woman who was homeless, who was undocumented, who arrived with 2 small children, who has taught me the most about generosity.
I am kind of reminded in your story about LBJ, and I wish I had the exact quote, I'm paraphrasing, but you can pickpocket anybody's pocket if you can give them somebody below them. So you just have to find that connection. If you're dealing with somebody in the South who's poor white, then you can look down on the slave. If you're in Northern Ireland and somebody's Protestant and the other one's, oh, but at least you're not a Catholic, and it's very easy to do that. And I think that that's a very astute observation, that you're making here. If people were more happy with themselves or contented with themselves, they wouldn't see this. And I think the key word that you used here was, the threat. I think we have a lot of that with white replacement and the browning of America, and people feeling that they're going to lose out on their, their particular, culture and identity. Would you say, I know that you're not, I'm guessing not political, but one of the things I wanted to ask, as I said, it was very difficult. I mean, we've spoken on the phone. I know you have 1 million people, so that wouldn't ring any bell, but can you take us just through some of the trials and tribulations? I'm assuming, I don't know, but there was a film that I watched recently, last several months, targeting El Paso, and they were trying to say that this was really a test case for Trump's zero tolerance policy. I'm not asking you to be political. What I am interested in how it affects you, as you've been doing this for 43 years. You told me how many people have you been notified? 60 people right now that may need a place to go today?
Today we're receiving 80 plus.
Okay, 80 plus. What is your highest number that you've received when is over 1,000 people? Is it something like that?
In fiscal year 2018-2019, what is October 1 of 2018 to September 30 of 2019, immigration released 150,000 refugees to us. So yeah, there were days when the number of refugees that were being released to us on that particular day was over 1,000.
There was another doctor too that I looked at his shelter, and they were all the doctors were telling me, it's like they get a ding on their phone and they'll say this many people hit. I wondered, I was told this, and I just want to check it with you, that when I went with Dr. Gutierrez, we went to this hotel that was totally packed, and said that you don't take any government funding because you don't want the bureaucracy and you want to run your own fair. That seems like that would be a very heavy economic undertaking to fill a hotel. I mean, 3 floors of a hotel. I mean, I was really like, how can you do that? And that's obviously only one place when you got 1,000 refugees that have, that have hit the floor or something like that. So how do you fund all that? I mean, I know you said, are the donors or the contributors that big? Is it a grassroots where it's small amounts of money but just large? Or?
Well, the donations that we receive are from $1 up to $50,000, $60,000 at a time. It just varies, and it is many. The vast majority are donations of $100, $200, $75. That's the vast majority, and there's just many people in the United States that have shared. There's also churches that take up collections. There are groups that have fundraisers. A couple of weeks ago, there was a local high school that has their rival, and every year they have this competition between the 2 schools for homecoming, and they connect with a Chick-fil-A, and they make this agreement that during a specific time frame of a week or 2 weeks, everybody who shows up and says I'm a fan of this high school, or I'm a fan, whichever one of the 2 schools ends up sending the most patrons, Chick-fil-A then gives a certain percentage, and one of the high schools chose Annunciation House as their charity this year, and that school won And so as a result of their efforts, their spirit efforts, Annunciation House received a check for $2,000 from Chick-fil-A because of this high school. And so
Sounds like you're a financial wizard to me. I don't know how
well,
you're.
no, actually, it's God who has moved individuals throughout the entire 43, almost 44 years of the history of Annunciation House. And you're right. When the flow of people, that hotel you went to with Charlie, there was a period when we were operating, in addition to all of our houses, we were operating 5 hotels simultaneously. So it wasn't just one hotel; there were 5. Sure. And you're right; it's financially a very, very heavy financial burden. But God has provided. God has provided. You're right. We've in the entire 43, 44 year history of Annunciation House, we've never accepted one penny from the federal or the state governments, and part of it is the bureaucracy. Part of it is how important it is that we be allowed to operate how we feel we need to operate. So we have the freedom to operate how we want to operate. We receive many refugees that are released by immigration, but we also receive refugees that cross the border that haven't been apprehended, and we provide hospitality to them right along with everybody else. And so we're willing to do that, and we do that.
You look. I've only seen photos of you. I've seen videos. I mean, I know something about Annunciation House, but you look so fit and energetic and so driven. And when I look at you, you don't look tired to me. You may be, but it's not kind of showing. What keeps you going for 43 years? I mean, I had my first sabbatical after 27 years, and I was always passionate as a teacher, and I'm really thinking about what's going to happen after. I think I needed a little break. I needed to catch the fire to get you going again. And I mean, I really tip my hat to you, especially in this kind of organization, that you've been doing it for 43 years. So what gets you up every morning?
Obviously, it's the refugees. It's the we recently had this very young man who fell off the wall and injured his leg, and he was from Ecuador, and he had been abandoned by his family, and he from his parents. He had an uncle that he had never met who was in New York, and he managed to get to New York, and through the grace of God, I came across an attorney who said, "Look, if there's anyone that needs legal help, I'm connected to many attorneys across the country." And I said, "Look, as a matter of fact, there's this kid. He's 20 years old, and because his parents abandoned him, he's a prime candidate for what is called a special juvenile immigrant visa. And he's in New York, and he needs an attorney, and he needs that attorney before he turns 21 to apply for the special immigrant visa." And so she connected me with an attorney who then sent out the plea just on a listserv, and an attorney responded and said, "I'll take his case." And so the application has already been submitted. That kid, his life has been radically changed because the application for the special juvenile immigrant visa has been submitted, and if immigration approves it, it will give him permanent residency. It will document it. It will legalize it. It will radically change his life. Annunciation House was one of 4 sites that were selected to receive the families that had had their children taken from them under Operation Zero Tolerance. We probably received maybe 450 families after the children had been reunited with a parent, and then they were released and they came to us. There are no words to describe what it was like for these parents, some of whom had been separated for literally 5 and 6 months, had no idea where their children were, what was happening with their children. And finally, because of the judge in San Diego who found the program to be illegal and ordered immigration to reunite all these families, there are no words to describe the scene of having families, parents, reunited with their son, their daughter, their sons, their daughters. I say to people, how can you not want to do this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever worked with Linda Rivas at Las Americas?
Oh, sure.
We did an interview the last time we were here, and we've gathered all the different people that can kind of help us. I want to ask you, just kind of going forward, you've been doing this for 43 years. How much longer do you think that you will be doing? And if you were moving and you were looking for, I don't know, your dream of dreams, your kind of success, what would you like to happen moving forward? Would you like to be redundant? And I mean not.
The United States has 11 million undocumented individuals. We've had these millions and millions of undocumented people living, working, making their lives in the United States now for years and years, and we refuse to legalize them. Going forward, I would like to see Congress pass the legalization. It is tragic. It is truly, truly sad that we are so lacking inside of ourselves that we are incapable of acknowledging the humanity that lives with us, that helps to make our country the country that it is. Going forward, I want us to set up a system that allows the orderly arrival of refugees, especially refugees from the South. People from Mexico, people from Guatemala, El Salvador. Migration will never, ever stop. It'll never stop. You can go back, for those that read the Bible, the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a testament to migration. The continual movement of God's people. This is God's people. And it's not just Exodus. It's throughout the Old Testament. It is a testament to the movement of God's people. And so we have to set up a system. We are not going to stop receiving people. Our lives are totally tied up with the lives of people in Central America, in Mexico. And they're tied up because, for economic reasons, we've been involved in all of these countries. We've been involved in coup d'etats in these countries. You know, we organized the removal of governments that we didn't like. We installed Somoza and the National Guard in Nicaragua.
Rios Montt, and
so our hands are not clean, you know, and human decency calls upon us to set up a system that allows people to arrive and to be allowed to enter the United States, to integrate, and at the same time make a real commitment to work with the governments in Central America and Mexico to bring about the kinds of changes that end the corruption, the violence, the gangs, the insecurity, that simply push so many more people to leave their countries.
I want to thank you very much for the interview. I
You're
hope
very
that
welcome.
you allow me to take a picture with you
Sure.
before we go. We're still rolling, but you seem to me, and obviously this is very superficial, an incredibly humble person, somebody that, just has this tenacity that I admire, that you can do this for so long, and that you seem so powerful, and this is so, moving. And really just all the work that has taken place. I mean, it is phenomenal to see. I also think, as you were talking about with respect to the, not taking government funding, I mean, that is really in some ways difficult to see how you can handle all of that, especially if you were talking about 5 hotels that were kind of set up. And I remember it all being filled and Charlie saying, hey, it's all taken care of by Ruben. I said, how do you do that? Where does this come from? So I just want to know that I applaud all your efforts, and I will certainly make a donation, to Annunciation House going forward. But I felt a little pushy today, but this is like the 3rd time I try to get you. And so I think it's okay. I can walk away. We go back to California, one week of solid interviews and trying to get out different stories and talk about racism, systemic racism, doing it. But I just really feel you made my trip. So I really thank you for taking the time out for us and allow us to put this
Thank
together.
you for your perseverance.
Well, I tell people I have one strength, and that's about it, and it's tenacity. I don't think I know what it was. I can remember my doctoral dissertation where everybody said, oh, doctor, and I said, I think the only thing you have here is the tenacity to not quit. If you can get through the whole thing and write it and all the pages, and then, a lot of people call me like a one-man show. I think of all these different ideas and, I put it all together, and then of course I have my great videographer that comes with me, but it's very little. Sometimes I get very high and with the intellectual and the things that I think are great, and then I can get, I just feel like it's such an upward. It's like, the myth of Sisyphus or something like that. I just think, oh, here comes the rock again. And I think what I'm interested in is mobilizing. What I mean is, like, if everybody knew about this, I never thought about it. It would be great, fundraiser where I am. Again, teaching at a Hispanic institution and sharing it and getting people on board, because it seems like you have to mobilize people from all over that kind of have the same idea. I have to say also that I think you would temper me. I'm very passionate. I think I gave a very, well, Jim said it was good anyway, but a very passionate speech when I went to the Walmart today. I didn't even know. It was all improvised. It was like, this is I wrote the paper, I've driven all this great distance. I felt very kind of humbled to be there, and just this atrocity, that had taken place. But the idea is to kind of move people. And I'll just share one last thing and then I'll stop. But I knew some of the principal shakers and movers in Northern Ireland for peace, and the vast majority were women, really fantastic women. And I was talking to a lady because I wanted to get some production, and she said, I asked her for her advice, and she said that these women that you're talking about are very well known. Well, they're very well known in Northern Ireland, not in the rest of the world. Her recommendation was to talk to all the common people and see how the Good Friday Peace Accord affected them. Not those politicians and the great, and they're great, but on a daily basis, what is it that these women lived through in the Good Friday after 1998, the Good Friday? And it seemed to me like you were saying, I'm looking for that shock thing, like, Dr. Charlie's talking about someone hanging from the bridge, or a woman that was forced into the sex trade and her kid was there, and oh my God, I mean that. And then, on the other hand, you're talking about a vast, group of people. And I think that sometimes I need to be checked, because I like that passion, and I think that you had some very sage wisdom there, and I appreciate that. So if I could just
Thank
take
you very much.